compact availability, and so on are very important to us. So therefore, we pose the question of, where is the passport for cyberspace? What is the minimal requirement? You wouldn't just give cars freely to children or what have you, say, go get on the road and drive. You have to have a license. You have to have authority to do that. So we believe that there certainly should be some focus on minimum requirements for computers. Should computers be sold without authentication or without encryption, identity requirements, and so on. So we believe there should be some more focus on that as well. Biometrics, perhaps thumbprints, being able to have that passport to cross into cyberspace, if you will. We also saw that in each of our sectors, because we had the airline industry present, of course, Monty Ford was the co-chair on this sector with me, and as well as the rail industry, for example. So we do pretty well internally within our own sectors, if you will, for rail, communicating cross-functionally within our cross-functional teams, including the government, including all of the various corporations present. But we don't necessarily do a great job as we cross through from rail to air versus ocean versus motor and so on. So there's probably some opportunity there. So I think some of us have talked earlier about rules of engagement and so on. So while if there is a rail crisis, all the rails tend to communicate relatively well in the domestic United States. We could stand some improvement internationally, but do we really communicate well cross-sector to share that information from a rules of engagement, assert-like process? I think someone mentioned earlier Center for Disease Control, what's that, bridge that into our industry, if you will. And I think that's about it from the transportation side.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you very much.
John.
So I think as has been witnessed in the last month, a crisis in one segment of the transportation industry can create another interesting pressure point on a different sector of the transportation industry in what happened with the airways in Europe. And so a couple pieces I took away from what you were describing. It actually harkened back, and I recall it very clearly, in 2003 when the airline industries were affected on their self-service and managed kiosks when SAF Slam hit, and all of a sudden the ability to check in was affected electronically. So the two pieces I pulled out of that essentially were, you made a key point that self-service is happening more and more in commerce. And as a result of that self-service, if that self-service is not working, the ability to continue service is rare. Because we're just not designed in order to recoup from that not being there. So I took that to heart, and I think that's a key technological discussion as well. And then the second one is that to a great degree, I think, like almost every other segment, while the implications of electronic penetration could be different, or electronic damage can be different, the threat and the method by which it is being perpetrated upon any segment, be it rail, be it enterprise corporation, be it something like the airline industry, is approximately the same. So the idea of the reach across to the multiple segments to me was the second piece I took away.
Great. Kamlesh.
I think I'll once again start with the identity issue, which has been raised to the level of having some kind of a passport for any device that is connected and any device that is being used for actually delivery of services in the transportation sector. Transportation sector being very vulnerable, and criticality of control systems. The point also was made that the control systems should be made sort of independent, because every device is acting as a major data center. So identity will actually focus on who are the players and what kind of things they are engaged in. And in the event of incidents, one will be able to track back to where things happen, and then probably zero in on the kind of vulnerabilities which existed and how these could have been handled for future learnings.
Thank you. I think as we start to look at what some people would call a black swan event in the transportation industry with the volcano of recent, and you saw lots of people got trapped in whatever country they were in and couldn't move, I think it starts to underscore the importance of the private-private partnership across the intermodality of rail and air and sea, and what is that backup plan going to be if one of those modes goes down, whether it's from a physical or an electronic event. And so as I was thinking and listening to you, I was really struck by intermodality learning that could happen from a private-private partnership here and how we could facilitate that dialogue. So thank you. We're going to move on to energy, and my good friend Scott Borg is going to present from his group.
Feels very strange to be standing here in front of a panel with a handheld mic. This must be what it feels like to audition for American Idol. We were the energy group, so we got the fun stuff. We covered oil and gas, electrical power, nuclear energy. It is possible with a pure cyber attack to blow up refineries, to destroy enough generators to eliminate the electric power for a region for many months at a time, to blow up pipelines, to do really horrendous things. We had a brilliant panel, a brilliant group, brimming over with expertise and good ideas, so I'm spoiled for choice. I'm just going to pick out 3 themes that seem particularly relevant to this group because they were international in focus and because they were a little different than some of the international themes we've been hearing about. In other words, they're not international themes that are about legislation or treaties. They are about other levels of international cooperation. The first crystallized for me in a moment in the discussion that was a real East-West Institute moment. I was talking with Vladimir Ivanov, and we both acknowledged that each of our countries had probably embedded malware in each other's critical infrastructure industries, and each of our countries was probably ready to destroy the other country's critical infrastructure industries on relatively short notice. And we thought about this for a moment, long silences and meaningful looks and things, and we realized that not only did we not want to do this, but we actively, this was the last thing we'd want to do. This was something we'd actively want to prevent. The last thing we would want would be Russian refineries to blow up or pipelines to blow up or the Russians to be without electricity. Just speaking from the American standpoint, we don't want Russia destabilized. We don't want global supply chains interrupted. We don't really want anything bad happen to critical infrastructures in Russia or really in any other countries. So there's an enormous opportunity here for common interest in international cooperation. Second point, in order to achieve something in this area, you need to start thinking not just about cyber attacks as something that requires technical solutions, but about cyber attacks as something that require strategies that are broader, resilient strategies. And when we start talking about resilient strategies, the expertise is utterly international. This is partly because the supply chains for critical infrastructures are international, but it's partly because we have taken different routes, we've chosen different options, and so we have very different capabilities. Just taking nuclear as an example, the United States now is going to restart a nuclear program. We're going to add new nuclear plants. The country that knows the most about these and how to secure them and how to manage them is France. The country that has the state-of-the-art pebble bed reactor up and running and has been doing experiments with this is Germany. The country that knows how to manage problems with upgrades of old nuclear facilities is Russia. The country that has been supplied the most of the expertise, concentrated expertise, for administrating these kinds of facilities internationally is Sweden, out of ABB, and so on. I could keep on with the list. So in order to address problems of resilience and secure our critical infrastructures against cyber attacks and other things, we utterly need international cooperation. And we need dialogues like the kind that are starting here. Third thing is that in order to make progress in these areas, there are certain key decision makers, policy makers in the world we have to reach. And these decision makers are all international figures, often because they run multinational corporations, or they head other kinds of international organizations, or they're responsible for international policy initiatives. So the people that we decided we most need to reach in order to deal with these issues that we were raising in energy systems were these international players